The next factor that we will discuss is abilities, which falls under a bit of a gray area. Every Pokemon will have one ability selected during a battle. An ability's purpose is to provide a passive effect, which means that it will activate without the player having to take an action. The power of this effect varies greatly from ability to ability. Similarly to moves, Pokemon have what could be called an ability pool, or all the abilities they could possibly select, with this ranging from 1 to 3. There are much fewer options to work with here compared to moves, with some Pokemon being limited to just one ability, making it not always clear how much influence a player can have on this factor. Now that you understand the basic premise of abilities, I will explain some of the more common abilities that you will likely run into during battles. As there are hundreds of abilities, and many serve similar purposes, I will be grouping them into categories. First, we will look at some abilities that provide an effect that benefits your Pokemon defensively. As you play competitive Pokemon, you will find that one of the most commonly encountered abilities is Intimidate. This ability activates when its user enters the battle, and it lowers the target's attack stat by 1 stage. Stats are either raised or lowered in stages. There are 6 positive and 6 negative stages. For the increases, each stage is an additional 0.5 times, with the maximum increase of 6 stages being a 4 times multiplier. The negative stages scale a bit differently. Intimidate is considered a very powerful ability, as it can very easily cripple physical attacking Pokemon, simply by entering the battle. This is especially true in double battles, as the ability targets both opposing Pokemon. Next, there is Unaware. This ability is constantly active, and its effect is to ignore the opposing Pokemon's stat changes. This applies to a couple of scenarios. If the opposing Pokemon has raised or lowered its defense stats, the Unaware Pokemon will ignore those changes and calculate the damage as normal. Also, if the opposing Pokemon has raised or lowered its attacking stats, the Unaware Pokemon will ignore those changes for the damage calculation as well. Pokemon with the Unaware ability can be very useful, as they can make an opposing Pokemon that has increased its own stats a much smaller threat. There are also some abilities that can heal your Pokemon, similarly to healing moves. One very powerful healing ability is called Regenerator. This ability restores 33% of the user's maximum HP upon switching out. When it re-enters battle, it will have that HP back. Similarly to Intimidate, this is a very powerful ability due to its ease of activation. Pokemon with the ability Regenerator are known for sticking around for a long time in battles. Another very powerful healing ability is called Poison Heal. This ability actually has 2 effects. Firstly, it is granted immunity to the damage that comes from the poisoned or badly poisoned status conditions. Instead, if it is poisoned, as the ability name suggests, this Pokemon heals 12.5% of its maximum HP at the end of each turn. While this might not seem like a lot, it can certainly add up over the course of a battle. Not only do Pokemon with this ability get a consistent source of healing if poisoned, but they also then cannot be affected by another negative status condition, which can be very useful for your team. You may be more familiar with the type chart now, but there are also abilities that can play into type matchups as well. First, we have abilities that reduce the damage of either certain types or just super effective moves in general, such as Heat Proof, Thick Fat, Multi-Scale, or Solid Rock. These abilities can be very useful for the Pokemon that have them, as they provide large reductions in the damage they take. Going even further, there are many abilities that provide entire immunities to move types. Levitate is the most common here, which grants immunity to ground type moves. There are many more abilities which are even immune to types nothing is immune to through the regular type matchups. For example, there is Flash Fire, Sap Sipper, Lightning Rod, Water Absorb, and many more. Most of these even provide benefits for if they are hit by a move that they are now immune to, such as a stat increase or healing a certain percentage of HP. Simply having a Pokemon with one of these abilities can discourage your opponent from using moves of that type. Besides type immunities, some abilities also provide immunities to other things, such as Magic Guard or Overcoat. In regards to defensive abilities, the final kind to go over is a set of abilities that activate when the Pokemon is hit with a contact move. First, we have the ability Iron Barbs. When a Pokemon with the ability Iron Barbs is hit with a contact move, the user of that contact move takes 12.5% damage in return. Next, there are 4 abilities that similarly may hurt the opponent if they hit them with a contact move, in Flame Body, Static, Effect Spore, and Poison Point. These abilities have a 30% chance to inflict their respective status conditions on the opponent. Abilities like these work well with defensive Pokemon, as they discourage the opponent from using contact moves against them due to the potential negative effects they could face. Now we will discuss some more offensively oriented abilities. First, we will look at abilities that increase your Pokemon's stats in battle. Some abilities, such as Moxie or Weak Armor, will increase your Pokemon's stats once triggered by a specific action occurring in a battle. Once you switch out, these stats will be reset, and you must take those actions to get the boosts again. Also, there is the ability Guts, which increases the Pokemon's attack stat by 50% if they are statused. If they are burned, they also do not have their physical moves power reduced. This increase is not reset upon switching out. The increased attack will remain as long as the Pokemon is statused. There are also some abilities that can increase the power of moves instead of sets. For example, the trio of abilities Overgrow, Blaze, and Torrent increase the power of moves of their respective types by 50% when that Pokemon is at or below 33% of their total HP. Otherwise, this effect will not trigger. Also, there are some abilities like Tough Claws, which increases the power of all contact moves by 33%. Nothing needs to be done to trigger this effect, and it will always be there as long as the Pokemon has this ability. There are also the very powerful abilities Huge Power and Pure Power that double the Pokemon's attack stat. This ability provides a passive increase, meaning that all damage calculations will be done with this version of the attack, including stat multipliers. Lastly, for this section, we will look at Mold Breaker. Mold Breaker does not provide a direct offensive bonus to your Pokemon per se, but its effect is that the user will ignore the opposing Pokemon's ability when using a move. One common example of this coming into play is when a Mold Breaker Pokemon faces another Pokemon that has an immunity ability such as Levitate. Mold Breaker can be very useful in this situation despite no power boost, as it allows you to hit Pokemon with potentially super effective moves that they would otherwise be immune to. The next set of abilities that we will discuss are all related to the weather conditions and terrains, which are sets of mechanics that affect the whole field during battles. Before we get into these abilities, I will explain these mechanics for you. There are 4 different types of weather that you will primarily encounter. I'll explain them in pairs, as these pairs share more similarities. First, we have harsh sunlight and rain. These two weathers increase the power of fire and water moves by 50% respectively, and decrease the other by 50%. Also, no Pokemon can be frozen when harsh sunlight is active. The next two are Sandstorm and Snow. These two just provide defensive boosts. Sandstorm gives a 50% increase to the special defense of Rock-type Pokemon, while Snow gives a 50% increase to the defense stat of Ice-type Pokemon. In addition, while Sandstorm is active, all non-Rock, Ground, or Steel-type Pokemon will take 6.25% damage at the end of every turn. All of these weather conditions last for 5 turns, and they can either be activated by a move or an ability. These abilities activate upon the Pokemon entering the field. Only one weather condition can be active at a time. This means that whenever a new weather is activated by a move or ability, the previously active one will be overwritten. If 2 Pokemon with weather activating abilities are sent onto the field simultaneously, the order that the weather conditions activate is based on each Pokemon's speed stat. In this case, being the slower Pokemon can actually be a major benefit. Beyond the weather's effects themselves, there are also many abilities that are triggered by a certain weather condition. For example, there are multiple speed boosting abilities that activate under each weather condition. Also, there are abilities that provide healing benefits when a particular weather is active. Charizard is actually a big beneficiary of the harsh sunlight weather condition due to its ability Solar Power, which grants a significant 50% increase to its special attacks. Terrains are a similar concept to weather conditions, with the main distinction being that they only affect Pokemon that are on the ground, meaning flying-type Pokemon or Pokemon with the Levitate ability are unaffected by them. Terrains overwrite each other in the same way as weather conditions do. However, a weather condition can be active at the same time as a terrain. There are 4 terrains in total: electric terrain, grassy terrain, misty terrain, and psychic terrain. Similarly to the weather conditions, the terrains all have an effect on the damage of certain types. Electric, grassy, and psychic terrain all increase the damage of their respective types by 33%, while misty terrain reduces the damage of dragon-type moves by 50%. Grassy terrain also halves the damage of the moves Magnitude, Bulldoze, and Earthquake. In addition to damage modifiers, these terrains all have another effect for grounded Pokemon. When electric terrain is active, grounded Pokemon cannot fall asleep. When grassy terrain is active, all grounded Pokemon heal 6.25% of their maximum HP at the end of the turn. When misty terrain is active, grounded Pokemon cannot be afflicted with non-volatile status conditions. Lastly, when psychic terrain is active, grounded Pokemon cannot be hit by moves with increased priority. As is the case with weather conditions, terrains can be activated by certain moves or abilities. Since terrains are a relatively newer introduction to the Pokemon games, there are less abilities that take advantage of them currently. Weather and terrains can provide some very powerful benefits to your Pokemon, so it is actually very common to see strategies and teams built around Pokemon with the abilities that can activate them. There are a few weather conditions remaining that I will bring up. The reason I am bringing these up separately is because they can only be activated through the signature abilities of 3 legendary Pokemon. A signature ability refers to an ability that is exclusive to one Pokemon. This means that these weather conditions are much rarer and difficult to set up. Extremely harsh sunlight and heavy rain are essentially more powerful versions of harsh sunlight and rain. Strong winds causes moves that are super effective to flying types to deal neutral damage instead. Another slight difference is that these weather conditions will last indefinitely, as long as the Pokemon with their abilities are on the field. These weathers cannot be overwritten by the regular weather conditions. The only way to override it is by bringing in a Pokemon with one of the other 3, to knock them out or for them to switch out. Legendaries are not the only Pokemon with signature abilities. Mostly signature abilities operate as any other ability does. However, there are some exceptions. Many Pokemon have signature abilities since that is how they can change forms. Some Pokemon have alternate forms within the same species. The mechanics of these forms can vary greatly from Pokemon to Pokemon. Some are merely aesthetic differences, Some only occur in battles, and others must be changed outside of battles. One notable example of Pokemon that changes forms in battle due to its ability is Aegislash. Aegislash's signature ability is Stance Change. This ability allows Aegislash to switch between an offensive and defensive form depending on which move it uses. These two forms have notably different stats, so this adds a level of complexity when deciding what moves to use with Aegislash in battle, as the ability's effect of changing forms is triggered by the trainer's actions. There are also several Pokemon that can change their forms outside of battle due to held items. Forms can vary in everything from base stats to typing, so it is important to get a grasp on how the Pokemon's forms work if you're using them. The final type of abilities that we will look at is abilities that only function in double battles. There are some abilities such as Friend Guard that's only effect is to provide a benefit to your ally Pokemon. In single battles, this ability has no effect, but it can be a useful tool to have in double battles.